Okay, so our next unit is about Mendelian genetics. And I find that students in the past have remembered this pretty well from high school. So if you liked doing Punnett squares, we're going to be doing some of those. If you didn't like doing Punnett squares, we're going to be doing some of those. But what I want to do in this class that maybe wasn't great from high school is talk about how meiosis relates to this. I did not get that very well when I was in high school, or probably not even at first when I was in college. So we'll proceed on then into Mendelian genetics. The reason why there is a branch of genetics called Mendelian genetics is because the person who figured this out was named Gregor Mendel. You remember this guy? So two of our colleagues in graduate school got married, and they were so into genetics they named their son Mendel after Gregor Mendel. And he was the person that figured out best the rules, the normal rules of inheritance. What plant was he using? He was using pea plants. How many people remember why it was lucky that he used those? What was good about pea plants? And lucky that he used them. You ever heard this? Here's some things that were good. There are a lot of things in pea plants that come in one variety or the other. Like there's two forms. It's purple or it's white. It's tall or it's short. It's wrinkled or it's smooth, and so on. They also give a lot of offspring that he could study. Big numbers of offspring, and those were some of the reasons why it was lucky that he studied pea plants. Other reasons that were really good about pea plants is that I'm going to say pea plants once in a while, just so you know. Pea plants. Pea plants usually self-fertilize. What does that mean? Do we self-fertilize? No. We cannot do that. They mate with themselves. Ooh, that's normal for plants. They mate with themselves. So the flower has male and female parts, can fertilize itself. It's like extreme inbreeding. Mate with yourself. So they can self-fertilize, or you can cross them. What's that mean?
Breed with another one?
Yeah. You make them have sex with another pea plant. That's what cross means. People that breed dogs, they sort of pick out, okay, you two are going to have babies. That's what a cross is. Same with plants. And then the other great thing is when you do cross them, or if they do self-fertilize, they make a lot of offspring per cross. And that's really efficient, so you can check, oh, you have 200 children? Let me check all of them. See what their genetic combinations are. Very, generally easy to do that in pea plants. And the pea plants have several characteristics or phenotypes that we can look at. Phenotype is one of your big vocabulary words. What's a phenotype that Emma King has? That's Emma King right there.
Brown eyes?
She has brown hair. She might have brown eyes. It's hard to tell from here. She's smiling. Is that a phenotype? That's maybe a behavior.
Depends, is all her teeth straight?
That would, I guess, be a phenotype, except these days people have braces sometimes. So.
And also the wisdom teeth, that's all that up.
Yeah. A phenotype is just some kind of observable characteristic. Or what you see. Oh, I'll have a good explanation of this in a minute. So what you're looking at here are just what different characteristics of the pea plants look like. Is the seed yellow or green? You can observe that. Is the stem tall or is it dwarfed? What about the pod? Is the pod yellow or green? Is the pod wrinkled or smooth? Is the seed wrinkled or smooth? Pea plants have a lot of specific phenotypes, characteristics that you can see. Yes, here's my friend with phenotype. This is another friend from graduate school. I think she might have been a postdoc when I was in graduate school. Her name is Vaishali Kachu, and she's very, very well renowned in her field now, and she has a lab, I think, at University of Arizona. Runs a research lab, and she would joke when she was in graduate school that she must have a certain phenotype that people would come up and ask her if she had any drugs. Like her observable characteristics and what she wore and what she looked like, I guess. She has a nose ring. People would come up and ask her if she had any drugs, and she would just say, I guess I've got the phenotype. And I always thought that was funny. She didn't do drugs. But this is her phenotype, and her husband is Icelandic and has a completely different phenotype, and their children have a mixed phenotype. They're very beautiful. I do not apparently have the phenotype that people ever ask me for drugs. I don't know. I don't have any anyway. So I want to go ahead and also introduce the other term that goes with this. What's the other term that's almost like this, but not? Genotype. Genotype. The genotype is the genetic combination or the genetic content that is present. That is not easy to see. The genotype cannot really be seen. It has to somewhat be determined. How do you determine someone's genotype? How do you know what their genotype is? See their parents? That would help. How would you really know?
Can't you get that stuff mapped?
I can now.
Can't they do like genetic mapping and stuff?
These days, you can find out what is your genotype for any place in yourself if you just get your genome sequenced, which costs about $1,000 now. Crazy. Is that good? Is that bad? These days, you can determine what someone's genotype is by sequencing their DNA. How did we used to do that before sequencing? It would still be sequencing. I mean, in the old days, you would do sequencing off of blood. These days, you usually do the cheek thing. Swab your cheek. With pea plants or with dogs or cats, you determine someone's their genotype by breeding them with another one of known genotype, and then you can eventually figure it out. That's the old ways. So the way that Mendel figured out genotype was by doing controlled crosses between his pea plants. Pea plants, yes. And the first thing that he did, which was very smart, is he let pea plants self-fertilize for several generations until they bred true, or they were true breeding. Every time that you watch, if you do, the Westminster Dog Show or the US Kennel Club or whatever, they are looking for the true breed type. Like, does this dog look right? Does it look how it's supposed to look? They don't really get the dogs to mate with themselves, but it's close. They're really inbred. So that they always look consistent. Like, oh yeah, that's a boxer right there. True breeding. With plants, you can make them do it to itself. Okay. And so, when you had plants that you know, they had all purple flowers all the time, all white flowers all the time. He called those the P generation, P for parental. P for parental. And then when he crossed true breeding purple flowers with true breeding white flowers, the plants would form seeds, and those seeds then become the F1 generation. F1 for first filial, which comes from Latin. Filial meaning like parent-child type stuff, generation. What does it mean that all the plants were purple when he did that? What can you tell from that?
It's dominant.
Purple's dominant. Purple's dominant. We'll get to that later. So in the F1 generation, he noticed that all of the flowers were purple. And he would have done that multiple times as well, not just with those parents, but with other parents. When he forced the F1 generation to mate with each other, which is not a big deal in plants, then he saw white flowers return. And we'll probably get to this more on Wednesday, but he saw, oh, that most of them are purple, some of them are white. If you can put yourself in Mendel's shoes and just think about it like looking at the colors, and you don't know how to do a Punnett square yet, that's useful to put yourself in his shoes. It's like, well, they were purple, but then there were some white ones in the next generation. This is one of my favorite pictures from my Facebook feed, or it's really Hans way back. Snow day with F1 N3. So that would mean that he and I are the P generation. This is so dorky. He and I are the P generation. This is F1 generation. What does N3 mean? It's offspring number 3. So we don't have hundreds of offspring. We have 3. He's the third. So cute. He looks the most like me out of all of them. That's as close as you can get to my phenotype. So he is the third member of the F1 generation in our family. And he probably does look 3/4 like his dad, I guess. So parental generation, F1 generation, F2 generation. If you let all these cross with each other, what would their resulting generation be? We let these cross with each other, what generation would they produce?
F3.
F3. Intro biology books never talk about F3, F4, F5, or any of those. That's how you would label them. So when Mendel saw that result, that if he takes a true breeding purple flower and crosses it to a true breeding white flower, he got all purple in the F1 generation. And then when he let the F1 generation cross each other, he got some white ones, but they're still mostly purple. He hypothesized that there were 2 factors, and one of them was hidden in the F1 generation. So he called them factors. Today we call them alleles. So I think the last thing that I want to talk about today is what an allele is. What does the word allele mean to you? What is an allele?
A trait.
Yeah. It's associated with a trait sometimes. What's a trait?
Characteristic.
A characteristic. trait is usually like a phenotype. An allele is really just a version of a gene. So, for example, what makes flowers purple or white are their pigments. Pigments make them what color they are. And there are genes that control pigments. There are segments in the plant's DNA that are genes for producing pigments. And so there could be a gene for purple version. There could be a gene for red version of flowers. And there could be a gene for nothing, or the gene is missing. That would give you white flowers. They don't have a gene to make pigment, thus the flowers come out white. A lot of times high schools teach alleles like with eye color. Like you've got the blue allele, you've got the brown allele, you've got two of the brown allele, so on. So keep in mind, an allele is a version of a gene. It's a variant of a gene. And if we go back to looking at homologs, and we look at mom's chromosome 1, and we look at, whoops, dad's chromosome 1. All of the cells in our body that aren't gametes, we've got mom's homolog, dad's homolog. And they have pretty much the same overall types of genes on them. Like we could call them A, B, C, and so on. Sometimes our parents both have the same allele. Sometimes they don't. Does that ring a bell? Like we tend to say big B, little b, big E, little e. For some genes, your parents might have the same allele, but some they might not. So if they have the same, if they've got the same version of a gene and they share that, there's no question then that you're going to end up with the big F version of that allele. There's no other choice. Sometimes two different versions exist. So what Mendel happened on is that he was looking at characteristics that were controlled by one single gene and where the parents differed in what versions that they had for that gene. That's where I'm going to stop for today. Please remember, come to lab today. And for Wednesday, you also have your Mastering Biology to do.